Alright, Path of Exile players, let's go over one of the biggest essentials in the game, which is how to actually trade for items. This is mainly going to be focusing in on the main Path of Exile trade website. So for starters, you're going to have to go ahead and log in. The official website is pathofexile.com/trade2 for Path of Exile 2, or just pathofexile.com/trade for Path of Exile 1. This video though is only going to be focusing in on Path of Exile 2, as well, that's the hot game right now. So for starters, you're going to have to log in whatever you decide to log in with: Xbox, PlayStation, Steam. We're going to be using Steam, but it doesn't matter. It's the same concept of every single one. And this is going to mainly focus in on how to navigate, how to search for the items that you want, and what stats are actually good. But this also ties into not only buying items, but also trading items, as far as, different currencies and all of that stuff. It's pretty straightforward with currency, so let's just go ahead and do that one really quick. So as far as currency goes in Path of Exile, the gold standard of like the two main forms of currency are going to be Exalted Orbs as well as Divine Orbs. So whatever you're trying to go for, usually people want these two forms of currency. The other ones, sure, people may want them, but for the most part, these are going to be your go-to currencies in the game. So like if you, let's say you have Chaos Orbs and you want to trade for the Exalted Orbs, you would just click I want Chaos Orbs and I have Exalted Orb, or vice versa. If you're like, I have the Chaos Orbs, but I want Exalted Orbs, then you would go ahead and do that. So items I have, select the one that you have, and then you just hit search. And you can see this person is, you pay 50 Chaos Orbs, you get this many Exalted Orbs, or whatever the case may be. Now, just a heads up, a lot of times you'll see that the ratio right here, like 1 Chaos Orbs is like 2.2 Exalted Orbs over here. The first few sometimes are just what's called a price fixer, meaning they're never going to sell you the item. But as you start going down, the ratios get worse, as in you get the best deals at the top. But the reason why people they do what's called price fixing is they list items that they hope someone else sees, and then the other person thinks, wow, this item is, only worth this much. Okay, I'll go sell it for this much. We can do a quick little example of this. If I was to go to, let's say, like an item like they call, let's just go to an item that's kind of popular real quick. So you can see this item called the Brotherhood. It's about like 1 divine, or if you go to Exalted Orbs, you can see people are listing it. And you can see there's some for 20 here, but some of these people won't respond. Now, this is realistic, but like, let's do an example. Let me see if I can find like a headhunter or something. Now, this is going to vary, but a lot of times you will see sometimes one person listing something for like way cheaper than it's supposed to be, and then everyone else is selling it for like kind of the normal price. But just be aware of price fixtures with currency as well as items. So keep that in mind as well. The next thing I want to go over, which is kind of the most important thing, is to kind of know what items are actually valuable in the game. So we're going to go over that. So for starters, this is going to cover all of the classes pretty much. A lot of these will overlap, even though I may be looking at a bow. You can still apply a lot of these things with the different types of weapons, as there's a lot of overlap. So for starters, let's go ahead and go over some of the most important pieces of gear for most builds. And this actually applies to almost every single build. There will be niche builds where you may not need any chaos resistance, but these are kind of things where they're more obscure, and most of the time with those sort of things where people are doing attribute stacking, they kind of know what they're doing, but there are weirder things in Path of Exile that aren't really traditional with most games. But for the most part, what you're really looking for on a lot of your defensive pieces of gears, which is kind of called like stat sticks in this game, are usually going to be either your evasion rating, so like high evasion rating, or armor, or you can get energy shield. Those are kind of like your main defenses. So depending on what class you're playing and what build that you're playing, you may want to invest more into like one particular one. And you also want to get resistances in a lot of the things called stat sticks. So like your helmet, your chest piece, as well as your belt and your boots. These items over here are going to be called like stat sticks. So again, you're looking for pretty much the same thing everywhere. Basically, lots of high amounts of HP and then resistances. That's pretty much, again, the same thing that you're looking for in like these 4 slots over here. Now, belts are a little bit different in PoE 2, as most of the time you're going to actually try to favor getting strength, because that does tie into getting HP. But there's also something called a base of an item. And the base of the item is going to determine, like, does it give you evasion? Does it give you different stats that can only maybe roll on that item? But if you're looking for like armor, there's a really good website, and I'll also link this down below for you guys, which is PoE2 DB. So what you can do with this is you can go to any of like the armor. So let's just say body armor, for example. If you click on the top where it says body armors in the item, you can see all the different bases. Some bases will have what's called an implicit, which means no matter what, unless it's corrupted, the item will always have that 15 to 25 to all elemental resistances. That is a range on where the things can actually roll. And some items, you'll see that this one has like some life regen, but depending on the class that you play, you may want evasion rating. So for example, if you're playing like a Deadeye Ranger, you may want to try to focus in on more evasion, but that doesn't mean you have to. Path of Exile, again, is a very unique game, but at least this way you guys can see what is the highest base of the amount of armor, evasion rating, energy shield, what is like the highest one that you can go for. So for the sake of just mentioning one of them over here, a lot of times the higher level requirement will give you more, but it doesn't always mean that that stat is always going to be better. There could be a unique item that kind of breaks these rules. But for the most part, the one that like I really like is Studded. So Studded Vest has the highest amount of evasion rating. Now there are several tiers in Path of Exile 2. You'll see it starts out as Studded Vest, and then it moves into the Expert Studded Vest, and then there's also like another one called the Advanced. So as you go up, it's going to have a higher level requirement, but it's also going to require more Dex, Strength, Intelligence. If it's Intelligence, it usually has a lot of Energy Shield. So that's kind of understanding like the base of the item. So when you are actually looking for the search, you can actually look for the base of the item that you want. So if I wanted to type in body armor, it's going to show me all of the body armors, versus if I type in Studded right here, it's going to just show me that Studded one, because that one has the highest chance to get the biggest evasion rating. Now, if I'm just looking for that, I can also just remove this in the search bar here, and then I can just go, let's say I can type in like 1,000 and just sort it by there. And if I want to see like how much can I get in terms of evasion rating for, let's say I have 10, and I'm going to go to the buyout price on the bottom here and then type in like Exalted Orb. So this is my maximum price. I can only spend 10 Exalted Orbs for this item. So what we can do also is we can click on any of these stats here, and it's going to sort all of them by that specific stat. So if I click over here, it's going to put for whatever I put in, like let's say this is the item that I wanted over here, and I wanted the highest amount of evasion rating. This one over here has 1,428, and it costs 1 Exalted Orb. If I wanted to whisper him, it would whisper him in game, he would invite me, and then we would do the trade. It's a pretty simple thing though. All you do is he's going to invite you, just hit accept, you throw the item, whatever it is, and then you just hit accept, and then that basically concludes the trading. Now for listing items, I already kind of made like a brief video on this, so I'll link it down below, but I just want to go over like how the mechanics of trade works in this video, otherwise we couldn't be here for a lot longer. But I can click on any of these. So this is how we can sort things. Now to get a little bit more in depth here, what we want on a body armor, so like let's say I'm playing a ranger. If I was playing, let's say, a warrior or a build that I want armor, then I would just go sort by like, let's say, at least 1,000 armor or something like that, right? But let's say this is what I got for my budget. My budget is 10 exalts. I want a new body armor. So what else is good on a body armor? Now, in general, again, what I'm going to call stat sticks, you usually just want the same thing. Again, it's either evasion, armor, energy shield, and then most of the time you want maximum life. And then you also want to choose, let's say, like cold, fire, lightning resistance. But you may not need specifically to get all of them, because if I just sort like cold, fire, lightning, and chaos res, I can't get that because there's only room for 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. And I want to say it's not really worth it to explain what all the prefixes and suffixes can roll, because then we'd be here legitimately for like, no, I'm not even kidding, like 10 hours to explain like what items can roll which sort of things. The basic understanding is on an item, in general, you will have 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes when the item is essentially complete. You can buy an incomplete item and then try to craft on it, but honestly with PoE 2, crafting is very, very rough. So you can get up to, this is the easiest way to put it, 3 suffixes that you would want to see on an item in most circumstances for stat sticks is all going to be just triple resistances. It doesn't matter which one. In PoE 1, we had the option to have this pseudo resistances that doesn't exist in PoE 2 for the search filter. So there's a couple different ways that you can try to sort by the highest amount of total resistances. There's tons of different ways to do it. I'm just going to show you the way I do it. So over here on stat filters, again, we're going over like, I want to buy an awesome stat stick body armor. So we would go, okay, I want maximum life. Let's say I want like at least 80 maximum life. Lock that in. We're going to put that in the minimum, not maximum. The next thing that we're going to do is we are also going to put in that we want some resistances, but we don't want to just put it in this category. We're going to do add stat group, and then we're going to do what's called a weighted sum. I'm going to keep it simple here, but just do weighted sum here. So what we can do then is we can type in lightning resistance, fire resistance, cold resistance. We can also type in chaos resistance. And so what this is going to do is it's going to show items with these stats. And then I'm going to put the minimum. I just want to have one. If I don't put any input weight, it's going to default them to be all the same. So what we're looking for right now, to kind of explain it in words, we're looking for a body armor that has at least 1,000 evasion rating, that gives us at least 80 life, and that has at least one of these resistances. Now, obviously, we want to get the highest number, and I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to hit search, and it's going to take a second. And now you can see how many results we have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click where it says sum. So that means the total amount of what is going to be our weight. So that is going to order the items. So now I can click on sum, and it's going to show off this one for 3 exalted orbs. It has 1,000 evasion. It's got the life we want. It's got fire and cold resistance. So it has 2 of them. Like, I would want as much resistance as possible. The stun threshold, unfortunately, is really bad. Now, I'm not going to get into crafting in this video because then this video could be a lot longer. But this is a stat that we don't want. Now, how can we remove that? Well, you can randomly annul it. You can go in Chaos Orb, hope you get it. It's a 1 out of basically 6 in terms of the chances. So on the suffixes, ideally, you try to get 3 resistances. But on the prefix, the only really important ones is going to be like life and then like plus armor or evasion or energy shield amount. But this is a good way for you guys to see. Now, also, I want to mention, the implicits will not show up here when you are doing your searches. It's kind of different than PoE 1 and 2. So this is very important when you're looking for resistances on a ring. You can actually find a ring that is way cheaper by simply just putting in whatever that you want. Let's say we wanted a ring, right? Let's say we wanted a ring and no evasion here. Let's say we kind of want the same thing. Again, a lot of these items will go across multiple classes and builds. So we want a ring, we want at least 80 life, and then we have, let's say 10 exalts is our budget here once again. So if I went ahead and hit search, if the implicit on the ring is going to have some sort of stat, it will not actually appear here unless we specify that it is that specific ring. It kind of goes back to when we were talking about with implicits. And if we were to go over a ring over here, we would go and we would select ring, and you can just Control F ring, and then I can click on ring, and I can see all of the different implicits when I click on the rings. So if I need, let's say, cold res, right, I can just type in that I want to get a sapphire ring. So that would actually make things way easier. So you'll see over here, if I go to the weighted sum, it will not count the implicit here. So this one says sum of 64, but it's only going to be counting these over here. It will not be counting this one. So this one actually is even more resistance because the implicit will not be considered here unless I specify on the implicit of, let's say, cold res on the implicit, which will then almost always pretty much be a specific ring type. So that way you can get items that are a lot cheaper because, again, this is something that it should just kind of show up in the sum over here, but it does not calculate. You can see this one over here, which is a ruby ring. You can see that it has these 2 stats, which would give us 60, but then this should give us 81, right? But it doesn't count it. So this is a way where a lot of people may not realize what they actually have because it's on that specific implicit, which technically you can get corrupted and removed, but for the most part, it's always going to have that. So this is an easy way for you guys to kind of see, like, again, the stat 6, which go, again, with most of the pieces of gear. Now, it depends on your build, but a lot of, like, the weapons and the offensive stats that you want to try to shoot for in PoE 2 are going to be like increased attack speed, some flat damage, unless it's spells, because then damage to attacks, well, you just want like increased spell damage if you're doing spells, but also getting levels is pretty big. You can also get levels in your amulet, so it's kind of the same thing. Again, you want resistances, you can get attributes in your rings and amulets. It just kind of depends on your build, but this is basically going over kind of like the ins and outs of trading. And then for your weapon, right now, even if you're playing elemental, a lot of times you want the highest amount of flat physical. If you're playing a bow build, usually dual string bow is going to be the most sought after because it gives you an implicit, which is always going to be there, unless it's corrupted, that it's going to have that additional arrow. That's how you shoot multiple arrows out. And you can also get a suffix, which gives you additional arrows. Now, as far as getting a bow over here, like if I was to go to, like, let's say I wanted a bow. So if I wanted a bow over here, what I would do, and it could be a sword, again, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, some of these will overlap. So let's say I wanted a bow, and then I've got 10 exalts. Now, I might want like a dual string bow, but there are some builds maybe you just don't really want that for whatever reason. You don't need the additional arrows. The attack cannot do what's called a shotgun, meaning that multiple projectiles can hit the same enemy at once. So let's just say I have 10 exalts, and I just want to sort, just give me the highest DPS. Now, does this mean that you're going to get the highest DPS? Not exactly. If you are playing a build, like let's say this is great, it's got physical damage, got fire, lightning, but what if I'm a cold build? Let's say on my passive tree, right? Like if I am like a build that I'm playing Ice Shot, right, on my passive tree, and I got all these modifiers that say, yeah, increase cold damage, cold penetration. Well, that's not going to really help our build because we need cold damage to scale. So sometimes you will actually get more value by getting something that shows up as less DPS, but it's actually more because your build favors a very specific thing. Additional arrows is not calculated in the DPS, but that can increase your DPS a huge amount depending on the skill. So don't always think that this is like your best method. It is somewhat better than nothing, but if you have 100% conversion of physical to an element, like certain skills like Lightning Rod convert 100% of the physical, well, that's great, then physical damage, good. But if you're playing a build like Lightning Rod, and it has lots of fire damage and cold damage, well, that might not help your build because you're scaling lightning damage. So I know it doesn't kind of give you that information of like, well, how much of this is better. There is something, this is where we get into crazy things. This is using an application called Path of Building, but you can like put in your weapon and it's going to calculate which item is going to be the best for you. Now, it doesn't exist for PoE 2 yet, but if there's ever an update, I will update you guys on that, because that is probably one of the most craziest tools ever, because it will grab your character and it'll tell you, if you have this amount, this is the highest DPS, this is the highest item for survivability. But for now, I want to keep this video a little bit short, because I'm not even kidding when I say I can make this a 10-hour video. I don't want to make it too crazy. But in general, this is kind of somewhat of a introduction to trading and kind of how it works. And ideally what you really want to try to do with the game in general is try to make sure you max out your resistances. I get asked all the time, Slaydra, how do I increase my DPS? Your DPS is better, or my survivability feels a little bit weak. How can I improve that? So you can do several different things. The skill tree can actually be a great way to do that, but also your gear is heavily going to influence how strong you are. But there are some abilities where I'm going to be straight up with you guys. Path of Exile 2 is not a forgiving game. There's a lot of these boss attacks that are like giant red. You simply just gotta roll out of them. But I can tell you for sure, getting increased movement speed will really help out with that. So in general, I'm going to kind of sum up some of the stats that you should look out for when you are actually trying to trade for Path of Exile. Another thing I really wanted to warn, like I said, this is PoE 1, by the way, with the pseudo resistance. It's a huge thing. There's also another thing right now with the Path of Exile trade website where sometimes there's overlaid stats, and for some reason, like if I type in attack speed, there's actually 2 attack speeds. One of them is fake, and if I hit, like, let's say increase attack speed, okay, this one works, right? But if I select this one and I go search, it may be in what's like in a different category. So you might think that, okay, I want gloves with attack speed. If you select this attack speed versus this attack speed, they're different. So just be aware when you're searching for something that is a big thing to take into consideration. But in general, your helmet, your chest piece, your boots, your gloves, ideally you want to try to get resistances and life on all of these. This is like an absolute must for PoE 2. Even your rings, your amulet, like getting a high amount of life, that is key, and resistances. For gloves, you can actually get some extra damage here. That could be physical, lightning. Again, it depends on the build you're playing. Maybe it's cold, whatever. And then increased cast or attack speed. You could also look for leech. Mana is a big issue in Path of Exile 2. So getting things on your rings with increased mana regen can be key. And then also mana on kill. That's a really awesome thing that you get on your weapons that will really help out with your mana sustain as you increase the levels of whatever spell gems, lightning skills, projectile skills. All of these will contribute to making things cost more mana or more of this stat. And a great thing that you can do is go to poe2.db, type in your skill over the top. Let's say we're playing like lightning arrow, right? And I'm going to type in lightning arrow, hit search, and you can see this website is so helpful because, like, if you're like, I want to build a build, okay, I'm going to run a lightning arrow that's level like whatever 24. How much base damage does it get? At level 10 over here, how much dexterity does it cost? How much mana is it going to cost? As you go up, these things will start to kind of go up higher and higher. So realize that when you're going for like any of these searches, make sure that you also tag in here. I know there's like so much to cover, and I don't want this video to be like 3 hours long, but it could be. But Also, when you are searching for pieces of gear, make sure that you have the requirements. That could be the level. Level usually isn't that big of a deal though, because like you're like, oh, I can eventually get there. But there's times where like if it requires you to have like 150 strength, your build may not be able to get that because like you have so many points into dexterity that you're gonna have to shift these pieces of gear, and it's just gonna kind of become a nightmare. So ideally, you want to try to get as much resistances as you possibly can, and also if you need the all attributes or strength, again, you can shoot for that in your rings and amulets. Those are great areas. Some items, like for example your quiver, you can roll dex, but you may not be able to roll strength. And like with belts, you can roll strength, but you may not be able to roll like dex or int. But another huge thing is getting actual mana, like flat mana, is pretty big on your boots as well as in your belt. That will kind of help out with mana. So again, let's go ahead and end it for this part. We could probably upload like a trade like part 2, because again, I don't want the video to be too long, but this is kind of like the basics of trading and kind of what items that you are looking for. In order for an item to be good in the game, you kind of need very specific stats. So hopefully this guide was informative. If there's any other good information that you guys felt like I missed out on, let me know down below and I can cover it in like a part 2 of the video session of like kind of how to trade and what items are good. Essentially what it comes down to is big DPS and specifically additional arrows or ranks to skill gems. Those are kind of like your big money makers. And then for like defensive pieces of gear, it's pretty much going to be resistances as well as getting maximum life. A lot of times though, if you guys do want to try to hit a jackpot, you can get an item that is bricked that has, let's say, an open prefix, throw an exalt, hit life on it, or hit like an open suffix of 1 more extra resistance, and that could be big money. But that's the risk that you take without buying a bricked item, so to speak, or an item that kind of doesn't work. You can also slam a Chaos Orb, but I really don't recommend people that go into crafting as it's very RNG based, and you could spend hundreds of exalts, hundreds of divines, and get 0 out of it. And it's one of the most painful learning processes as a newer player. And that's why I'm probably not going to recommend it, but I will show you guys that later. Anyways, that's going to go wrap up the video. If you guys enjoyed it, drop a like on it. If you're new here, subscribe, turn on the bell to get updated with more essential Path of Exile videos, guides, and more things in the future. Anyways, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.